Hello, welcome to On Wildlife. I'm your host, Alex Ray. On this podcast, we bring the wild to you. We take you on a journey into the life of a different animal every month, and I guarantee you're going to come out of here knowing more about your favorite animal than you did before. On this month's episode, we'll be talking about one of the most beloved animals across the world. You may even be wondering how, in our 4 years of existing as a podcast, we haven't covered them yet. They're also the face of many conservation efforts because their populations have been struggling for many years. So join me as we head into the bamboo forests to talk about giant pandas. Before we start the episode, I want to tell you that I got the chance to be on the Solve It for Kids podcast to talk about how animals change over time. It was such a fun experience, and their podcast is awesome, so you should definitely go check them out. The giant panda is a member of the bear family, also known as Ursidae. If you're a fan of astronomy, you might know that there are constellations called Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. They're called this because they resemble bears, and Ursi means bear in Latin. The giant panda's scientific name is Ailuropoda melanoleuca. The first part of their name means cat-footed, and the second part means black and white. And that's most definitely because of their iconic black and white coloration. They usually have a white head with black around their eyes and on their ears. This coloration is pretty similar to raccoons, and for a while, scientists were trying to figure out if giant pandas were more closely related to raccoons or bears. We were able to determine that they're bears by looking at their DNA and comparing it to other bear species. These animals have the word giant in their name for a reason. On average, they're around 6 feet long, and they can weigh over 300 pounds. That's around the average weight of an NFL offensive lineman. Even though that's pretty huge, they're actually one of the smallest bear species. And there's another species called the red panda, but those animals are actually more closely related to skunks and weasels than they are to giant pandas. Giant pandas also have an average lifespan of 15 to 20 years. And we can't talk about them without mentioning their conservation status. Unfortunately, they're one of the most vulnerable species of bear in the world. We'll get to the reasons for that later on in the episode. And they can only be found in 6 specific mountain ranges in China, living at an elevation of around 5 to 10,000 feet. This habitat is known for being really misty and rainy pretty much all year round. And of course, there's a plant that's extremely vital to the survival of the panda. You may already know what it is, but I'll let you think about it until after the break. We'll be right back. On this episode, I want to give a shout out to Jessie from Utah. She recommended that we do an episode on giant pandas. Thanks for the recommendation. Remember that you can email us at onwildlife.podcast@gmail.com. If you tell me your favorite animal or want to make an episode recommendation, I'll give you a shout out on the show. Now back to the episode. Okay, so some of you may have already figured out that important plant I was talking about. It was bamboo. 99% of a giant panda's diet consists of bamboo. They occasionally eat small animals, but they'd probably still be classified as herbivores. Despite its appearance, bamboo is actually a grass, not a tree, and it grows insanely fast compared to other plants. Depending on the species, it can grow to be almost 40 feet tall. And in New York and Connecticut, it's actually illegal to grow certain types of bamboo. Unfortunately for pandas, they come from a lineage of carnivores. Pretty much all other bear species are either carnivorous, eating other animals, or omnivorous, eating both plants and animals. So their bodies can't really digest bamboo very well. So, in order to get all the nutrition that they need from these plants, they have to be constantly eating. They typically eat for 10 to 16 hours per day. And to get rid of all this waste, they poop on average 40 times a day. Bamboo is also pretty hard and woody, meaning that pandas need a strong bite to break it up. In a study that tested the bite force of over 150 carnivores, giant pandas had the fifth strongest bite. And I know I just said that pandas are not carnivores, but they were probably tested in this study because they come from a lineage of carnivores. Giant pandas' cranial cavities are enlarged, and they hold the strong jaw muscles that they have in order to create that powerful bite force. And when they eat, you may be able to notice that their ears wiggle. This is because their jaw muscles attach at the top of their head between their ears. They also have enlarged wrist bones that basically act as a thumb to hold the bamboo while they chew on it. It's pretty amazing to watch them eat. They know how to masterfully take apart a bamboo shoot. Because pandas need a whole lot of bamboo every day to survive, they're usually solitary and need their own space. They've been known to growl and swat at other individuals if they come into their space. Pandas will make an exception to that rule when it comes to mating. Because it's rare for wild pandas to meet, they need a way to communicate when they're not face to face, and that's when their sense of smell comes in. A female will communicate to males that she's ready to mate by leaving her scent on a tree. She'll do this using urine, feces, or a scent gland that's located on the base of her tail. Sometimes you can see pandas doing handstands, and this is a way for them to get their scent higher up on a tree so that it's easier for another individual to smell. Giant pandas have a great sense of smell that can go a lot further than we can with our nose. They're able to determine the sex of an individual, how receptive they are to breeding, and even how healthy they are just based on their sense of smell. They also use smell to identify if a piece of bamboo is good to eat or not. Throughout the entire year, there's only a 2 to 3 day period where a female is ready to mate, so timing is everything. And they'll usually only reproduce every couple of years. The female will have 1 or 2 cubs at a time. The cubs are born blind with no hair or teeth, so the female spends every hour of the day caring for them for the first week or 2. After this, they start growing hair and opening their eyes. Their teeth don't come in until about 14 weeks. Cubs nurse from their mother for over a year, and then they're ready to start eating bamboo. After around 3 years, the mother sends her cubs off on their own, where they can generally fend for themselves. When they're not fully developed, pandas will climb high up in trees to stay away from some of their predators like tigers and martens. They have strong, stocky legs to help lift themselves up, as well as large claws to allow them to grip onto trees. Okay, let's take our last break, and when we get back, I'll tell you what pandas sound like. Time for today's trivia question. What is the world's largest hot desert? The answer is the Sahara Desert. Okay, we're back. Although their claws and large size may be intimidating, giant pandas are mainly docile. This means that they're not really aggressive. If they feel threatened, they'll most likely try to escape, but they can use their claws and their powerful bite if absolutely necessary. Pandas are also known as one of the most vocal bear species. They can make at least 12 different sounds and use these vocalizations to communicate with other individuals. One of their most common sounds is a bleat, which actually sounds like a goat. and scientists think that this is a way of them showing affection for each other. Giant pandas are vital to the ecosystems that they live in. First, they help to keep bamboo in check. Remember when I talked about how fast bamboo grows? Well, if it weren't for pandas, bamboo would be overgrown and make it harder for other animals and plants to survive in those specific habitats. They also help to fertilize the soil. The fact that they poop over 40 times a day is enough to say that they're a major contributor of nutrients into the soil. Giant pandas also help to disperse seeds throughout the forest, and it's not just bamboo that they're dispersing. When they walk through their habitat and brush up against different plants, pollen and seeds can get stuck in their fur, which they would then transport to another location unknowingly. Unfortunately, giant pandas are listed as vulnerable on the IUCN Red List. There are only around 1,800 of them left in the wild. In the past, pandas used to be hunted, which did a lot of damage to their populations. Now, their biggest threat is habitat loss. As humans continue to build new infrastructure, it's diminishing the habitat of the giant panda. They need a lot of space and bamboo to survive, and as their habitat shrinks, they have less access to food. On top of that, giant panda populations can't recover as quickly as a lot of other species. Remember that females only have a 2 to 3 day window throughout the entire year in which they can mate. And they can only give birth to 1 or 2 cubs at a time, which means it's a very slow process to increase the size of the population. Luckily, there are tons of organizations that are working to help panda populations increase, like the World Wildlife Fund, Pandas International, and the Sichuan Giant Panda Sanctuaries in China, all of which you should definitely take a look at. Thank you so much for coming on this adventure with me as we explored the world of giant pandas. You can find the sources that we use for this podcast and links to organizations that we reference at onwildlife.org. You can also email us with any questions at onwildlife.podcast@gmail.com. And you can follow us on Instagram at @on_wildlife or on TikTok at @onwildlife. And don't forget to tune in next month for another awesome episode. And that's On Wildlife.
You've been listening to On Wildlife with Alex Ray. On Wildlife provides general educational information on various topics as a public service, which should not be construed as professional, financial, real estate, tax, or legal advice. These are our personal opinions only. Please refer to our full disclaimer policy on our website for full details.